restaurants in over 100 countries, Subway...
Guys, Subway has not fallen. Why does it say rise and fall? Subway is still part you.
has the most locations of any fast food chain on the planet. And at first that sounds like a sign of a thriving subgiant. However, Subway is anything but. Subway's closed thousands of stores in the last 3 years and saw a 25% fall in business from 2012 to 2017. So what happened?
I think it's Jared.
The chain began as Pete's Super Submarines in Bridgeport, Connecticut in 1965. 3 years later, co-founders Fred DeLuca and Peter Buck rebranded it to simply Subway.
Subway's famous giant foot-long sandwiches are made right before your eyes.
You're saying,
the way you want them.
What was so
you're saying Subway's low quality, but it has predictable dude, it has a predictable, acceptable standard, and that's not a luxury that a lot of places have. Fuck
telling
you.
then and still is today about Subway is really an open kitchen format. In many ways, they really pioneered that and the ability to customize your sandwich.
The brand redefined fast food with fresh ingredients that customers could see. Compared to other fast food chains at the time, it felt healthy. And it worked. By 1981, there were 200 locations across the US. And soon after, Subway went international.
In the late 70s and in the 80s and in the 90s, everyone knew about Subway. I mean, they were everywhere. They're still everywhere.
That's Joel Labava, an expert in franchising. While each store looks and smells the same, they're all independently owned franchises.
The format is pretty simple. You buy a franchise, you get trained, they help you secure a location, they help with a grand opening, and you're open. You're open for business.
Expensive, isn't it?
Follow the several hundred-page operating manual, do the advertising, and customers will come in.
Not only were Subway franchises successful, they were, and still are, one of the cheapest chains to franchise. It costs between $116,000 and $263,000 to open a Subway franchise. Compare that to opening a McDonald's, which costs up to $2.2 million.
That's nuts.
Because Subways were easy to open, the number of stores skyrocketed. Between 1990 and 1998, store locations rose from 5,000 to 13,200. And in that same period of time, gross sales rose by about $2.1 billion.
Buy one, you weirdos, dude.
Subway's success continued into the early 2000s. At a time when obesity was rising rapidly in America, Subway continued to market itself as a healthy alternative to fast food.
One of their biggest successes for sure was the Jared Fogle story. Everyone remembers those ads where it's him in those huge pants where he's showing how he lost all of this weight. And that just made them so much money.
Is that
really
him, chat?
Made people think about Subway as a really great health brand. It was one of the biggest advertising wins that any chain's had in recent decades. So that was a huge, huge part of their brand.
Subway carried Fogle's success story for nearly a decade. But by 2008, the world was suffering from the effects of the Great Recession, and for many Americans, hunting for deals replaced the obsession with weight loss. So Subway changed up its message. In March 2008, it introduced a new promotion that would come to define the chain. By August 2009, as other restaurant chains were struggling through the recession, the $5 footlong had pulled in $3.8 billion in sales for Subway.
That's pretty good.
A 17% jump in U.S. sales from the year before. But even the best deals run their course.
Chat, give me your take, fast. You guys like this? That thing with that?
But even
that pizza sub meatball thing? I think it's fucking disgusting. I think it makes the bread soggy and
best deals
vile.
run their course. Starting in 2014, Subway sales began steadily dropping. Behind the scenes, many of the reasons for Subway's success had turned on them. Quiznos was once Subway's main competition, but tons of subchains like Jimmy John's, Firehouse, Potbelly, and Jersey Mike's, and fast casual chains like Panera were offering seemingly fresher and healthier options. And they started stealing market share.
They're competing against people who bring in fresh produce every day. A lot of Subway locations only bring in fresh produce once or twice a week.
On top of that, fast food chains that had been around as long as Subway were coming up with healthy alternatives of their own and getting creative with new menus.
More and more fast food chains really want to
chat,
have that.
The alternatives for healthy shit at McDonald's are fucking disgusting. they're radioactive.
Food chains really
Wendy's
want
as well.
to have that innovation pipeline where they're bringing something out new
Little
almost
poison.
every month. Fast food places are looking for ways to bring in new customers, drive traffic, and Subway has not tried to do that in the same way other places have.
But other fast food chains weren't the only competition for Subway franchises. With Subway's franchising model making it so easy to open locations, stores inevitably started opening up around the corner from each other in lucrative markets. Take downtown Manhattan, for example.
Toronto.
Within a 15-minute walk and less than half a square mile, there are 10 Subway locations. And these locations in close proximity began cannibalizing each other's sales.
The Subway franchise agreement, the contract, it says they can open anywhere. There is no protected territory. So franchisees really
Guys,
have no
Toronto,
say so
Subway
in
and
where
Pizza
the
Pizza
other franchisees are going to open. It's a problem.
It's like
And
cancer.
Subway corporate wasn't stopping it, because the company benefited from a high number of locations. More locations meant more franchising fees, and high royalties to Subway corporate, which diminished the effect of falling sales from a single location.
When franchisees' sales are kind of slipping, as long as they're staying open, it doesn't necessarily hurt Subway as much as it would some other chains. If everyone's kind of like chugging along, like opening new locations, then they can kind of keep on keeping on, and it's not going to be the end of the world for the corporate office.
Franchise owners, on the other hand, took the hit. In 2012, each Subway franchise generated an average of $482,000 a year. 4 years later, that number had slipped to $422,000 a year. For comparison, the average annual revenue of a McDonald's franchise in 2016 was $2.6 million.
Holy shit!
And to make matters worse,
No way, dude. Wait, Jet, is it going to invest into making a fucking McDonald's then? That's crazy. If it's 2.2 for the franchise, maybe 2 for the building, after 3 years you're in profit. No way, dude.
And to make matters worse, Subway would lose the face of its company. In 2015, the man who had embodied Subway's Eat Fresh mission was charged with possession of child pornography and having sex with minors. Subway cut ties with Fogel, and he was sentenced to 15 and a half years in federal prison.
And the Jared Fogle thing kind of basically went from a huge positive to a huge liability, like the worst things possible that your brand could be associated with.
All of these things created the perfect storm for
Jesus.
Subway, and soon locations started to close.
Get
In
him out,
2016,
dude.
Subway closed 359 stores in the US. It was the first year the chain closed more locations than it opened. In 2017, that number was over 800, and by the end of 2018, over 1,000 locations had closed.
Damn.
With all these sour ingredients, it's hard to imagine Subway could bounce back. But the chain is certainly trying. In 2017, Subway launched its Fresh Forward program, starting with remodeled stores. The revamped locations featured new menu boards,
Wait, I've never seen that
Wi-Fi,
before.
USB ports,
Chat.
updated furniture.
Chat, I'm a huge Subway Andy, and I've never seen this shit before.
Revamped locations featured new menu boards, Wi-Fi, USB ports, updated furniture, and music.
I will give Subway credit. They're doing something interesting. They're offering grants where
See, look at
if
this
a
chat.
franchisee applies and everything.
Nobody's seen this shit before.
They can get up to $10,000 towards remodeling.
By the end of 2020, over 10,000 locations will have this new restaurant design. But Subway says food is its next priority, and it's backing it up with an $80 million investment in
That
updated
one.
menu items. Subway's partnered with the media company Tastemade to develop hundreds of new menu ideas, like the Green Goddess Tuna Melt and the Southern-style French dip. In 2018, the chain introduced its cheesy garlic bread, its most successful promotion in the last 5 years. And in 2019, a line of ciabatta sandwiches and Halo Top milkshakes hit stores.
Historically,
The fuck
Subway
is
would
that?
evaluate about 6 or 7 new menu items per month. But we've set up a process and invested in capabilities where we're literally testing at least 100 new menu items every month.
As for whether or not all these menu items and revamped designs will stop shuttering stores and dropping business, only time will tell.
They need to figure out who they want their customer to be. I think it's
Chat.
really an uphill battle for them.
Chat, does anybody remember the steak teriyaki? Not the chicken teriyaki, the steak teriyaki. Wasn't that fucking crazy good? Why did they take it out of the menu, dude? I love that. I only bought that.
But if they kind of go back to the basics, think about what people want, ask people what they want, and think
It's
about a little bit
region
more
locked.
innovation, that's kind of going to be a good start for them.
It was region locked. Chicken teriyaki is fucking poggy though. Chat, on a side note, I just ordered some McDonald's.